This is Patrick L. Sullivan, senior reporter for the Lakeville Journal, getting ready to cover the annual Cub Scout Banquet in Falls Village. Boys reaffirm their commitment to the Scout oaths frequently, to always do one's best and to help other people at all times. The highlight of the Cub Scout Banquet was the Arrow of Light ceremony, the graduation of 11 Cub Scouts to the rank of Boy Scout. Patrick began working on newspapers when he was a teenager. He's been with the Lakeville Journal 14 years on and off, and Falls Village has been his beat for 10 of those years.
Oh, Jerry, I want to show you something. Oh, good. Jerry, can I show you something?
Ironically, the Lakeville Journal is located in Falls Village. It's published every Thursday. Each issue begins on Tuesday of the previous week, when Cynthia Hawkswinder, the executive editor, assigns upcoming stories to her staff.
Tomorrow, Selectmen's meeting, special meeting on 32 Lake Street, aka the former Lambert K building. But I don't know what the meeting's about yet, but it's going to be about the building. So
all right, I'm going to put that under our towns for now. Lambert K.
Unless, of course, the whole deal's gone. If the whole deal's gone,
that's a big deal.
Story.
Sharon Daycare will hold its annual Easter egg hunt on March 31st at 11 a.m. Everybody who works at the Lakeville Journal has to go to at least one Easter egg hunt. Have you done an Easter egg hunt?
I have not.
Well, it's in Sharon too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And Alex, you'll on Monday morning you'll look at what you've got, and then you'll say, you know what? Actually, that's looking good for A1.
Yeah.
And it'll be something that maybe will be excess for World, or
and something may happen.
Something may happen. For A2, we're gonna have cups,
A1.
and there'll be some kind of animal that somebody will find. Oh, we have a bobcat.
Do we have a bobcat?
Yeah.
The bobcat. Oh, I wish he was looking at us.
I know. Well, if I get one between now and then, I'll
Do you
give
think John can send us what date he sent the bobcat in? Or what day he, not what day.
Sure, I'll write to him.
The Easter sunrise service, as always, is happening there on Delaverne Hill. If you'd like a photo of that.
Of course, that's New York State.
That'll be, but it's looking at Connecticut.
She's so good.
We always look at
She's so
Connecticut.
good.
It's a dirty look.
They have fixed up the Connecticut room at the Douglas Library in North Canaan.
Oh.
And at some point, would love somebody to come by and do a nice story on it. It's called the Pease Museum of Natural History, in fact, and it's a lovely little museum of somebody's collection of taxidermy. And if anybody wants to see, not to keep embarrassing Lance, but if you want to see what phenomenal photos can look like of a nonprofit fundraiser
Corned
dinner.
beef dinner.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing you want, is, you know, the people who are serving these meals, phenomenal. Look at that, how happy, like just, these are the people who come, these are our people. This is our towns and villages. There again, serving up is a really nice one.
Is that in Sharon?
This is in Sharon, that's my friend Dave Hosier, they're cutting up the corned beef in the kitchen.
So you wearing a
Adorable
sock?
children. He has an injured right arm, that's why he's wearing his cast on it. That, I mean, that's a beauty, that should be his campaign photo.
Dogs are good, especially because that is a dark room.
That's a dark room.
It's a really dark room.
With the difficult paneling.
It was a little bit of an issue, yeah.
He's good, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no natural light coming in.
Send the Gourmet Magazine photographer to take the corned beef and cabbage. It's a beautiful, glistening and beautiful. That's, I would eat that.
It just got this movie down.
That's very good.
That looks like wash, that looks
Yeah, I could do some time. But we do know that. We'll see him at the next dinner.
Get some schooling.
Okay, good. Hi, Wilbur, right?
Bernie.
Bernie, hi.
There are quite a few steps to putting together a newspaper each week. From the reporters going to meetings or conducting interviews, writing their stories, submitting them to the editor. The editor puts them, make sure that they fit the newspaper's style for grammar and spelling like that. The stories are proofread, corrected.
Did you get that in?
What?
Registration for the Spring Splash opens at noon, the plunge begins at 1.
Oh. Well, I'll come, I just have to be somewhere at 1, I guess I can be late.
Well, Patrick always does a good job.
Yeah. I just love to go.
This is our check sheet. So some of the elements we have to, there are a lot of tiny little elements on every page, and as we're looking at this last page, we're checking to make sure that everything is there, that there's a little black line around each photo, that the headlines are correct, that the town is correct, because at this time of day, as we start to get tired, we start to miss these little important things. So we have a checklist to make sure that we have the advertisements, the headlines, the bylines. So that's what we're doing now, is the final check before all the pages go up on the wall. And unless it's a really, really big problem, we won't change it. So for instance, the Dateline, which is the name of the town, should be up here, but it's not, but we're not going to change that. All the ads come into our ad salesman, and then they have to be distributed evenly among the pages so that you don't have too many ads on one page or too few. And of course, these dark blocks on the first 5 pages indicate color. So we have 2 color ads on this page, and then we have smaller. So that, what looks like that in our little mock-up, looks like that in the actual page. So this will be color, and that will be color. And we mark it as color just so that they know to make sure that the photographs are processed in color.
Each time we downsized, it was at the, started to be, we had our own press, the availability of, one is to standardize paper size. Sure. They give you a price for it. One of the next steps is putting together, designing individual pages. This week we have an 18-page paper. The advertising production department at the other end of the building is working. At the same time, we are making sure ads either come in the way they're going to be used or making up advertisements for us. And so when we're ready to design a page, we can place a layer on our template and work around that, putting in photographs and news stories, making sure the headlines are large and cover the stories. These pages are printed out, given another reading for potential errors, and I'm right now in the last phase. I've gotten pages back and I'm making corrections, and we'll print a final copy which we'll post on the wall and give a last review of before. By mid-afternoon the pages will be sent electronically to our printer downstate Connecticut.
So,
the front page takes the longest of any to put together each week because it has so many extra elements and more space to work with.
Thank you.
Of course, the types of stories and the types of photos change from week to week, and so I confer with the editor and look at what we have and try to make each front page look different from week to week, especially for people who are picking up the paper at the newsstand, so that they can appreciate that this is the newest issue. We change sort of a color theme each week. Once in a while, with St. Patrick's Day coming up, we'll put in a few decorations of some leprechauns. I look for engaging photographs. I love faces. This week we have children. This week we happen to have a truck accident and some newborn animals on local farms. The one I'm working on right now,
this will be this week's?
this is going to be this week's paper. Again, we have a different color. The
It's pretty.
top stories has to do with local marches.
Yeah.
And try to put in, whatever stories the editor designates for me to work with. And the advantage of the front page is I can continue stories to a second page, so that gives a little design flexibility. And we have a variety of tools available to us for, try to get large headlines, we try to get engaging headlines, engaging photographs, everything that will make someone want to start reading the story. So at this point, this week's front page has been through the proofreading process, so now suggestions have been made, and I will go through and incorporate them electronically before printing the final copy. I did pretty well this week. I don't have many changes to make. Alex at the next desk is doing the same thing I am. He is working on a different set of pages, obviously.
I did the police blotter, which is a very well-read page.
Oh, yeah, it's the first.
It's what everyone wants to know about.
Who was caught?
You'll have to read to find out.
Yeah.
It's a little smaller because we don't have as much snow, but I'm sure summer will pick up again. Crime you can always count on. It's true.
Yeah. What's been the most dramatic?
Anything with a death, I would say, is fairly dramatic. And we had one this week
Really?
Yes, we had a fatality in a car crash.
Was that an opiate overdose?
No,
that
in
was
a car accident.
in a car accident. Uh-huh. Yeah. And how long have you been with the paper?
Oh, I don't even know.
Alex was an intern here when he was in high school.
That's true.
So it's been a while.
No, it hasn't been that long.
Oh,
Good God.
So I'm doing research now for my stories for next week. So I like to have my whole issue figured out by Friday. And I start now whittling it down. I've got 8 or 9 stories floating around in my head, and by Friday I'll have 5 or 6. And on the weeks when we have broadsheet, which is just 2 pages, I then have to turn those 5 or 6 into 4 stories. But this next week coming up is going to be a tabloid, so I'll have room for more, probably 5 or 6 stories.
you write them all yourself?
I don't, no, I hire mainly, I usually don't write them. I usually like to find, if I'll find somebody who's interested in a subject, and I'll find that writer will write about it. I want people to write about stuff they love.
Cool.
And then I do write. I mean, I have 2 stories I'm writing for this coming week.
Uh-huh.
But it just depends on what the story is, who I'll find to write it. Normally, I have a fabulous team of writers. I've got somebody who writes about plants, and I've got somebody who writes about film, and I've got 2 or 3 people who write about films, 2 or 3 people who write about books. I've got somebody who loves to write about dance. I've got 2 great theater writers, and it just depends.
What's up, Eric?
Just moseying around,
Okay.
getting footage.
Mosey.
Yeah. Good to see you.
I'm working on classified advertising here.
Yeah. You're in charge of classified ads.
And Mark is doing classifieds.
Yeah.
Have you gotten that okay?
I did.
Yeah.
You're covering Winstead nowadays too, aren't you?
We are, we used to have the Winstead Journal as a separate newspaper for more than 20 years. Shaw Isaacson, who you were just speaking to, was the editor of that paper when we decided to fold it into the Lakeville Journal rather than have it as a separate newspaper last August 2017. So now we have more towns we're covering in the Lakeville Journal. It includes Winstead Journal brought with it Winstead, Orkhamsted, Colebrook, and Norfolk, which we're happy to have in our pages too.
Good.
And Shaw does the coverage for that area.
And you're the publisher.
I am. Publisher, editor-in-chief, Janet Manko. Yeah.
Great. So what's the most challenging part of your job?
Probably making the finances balance. So I'll encourage everybody to advertise with us. But, we're here. You know what? I should show you our first copy of the Lakeville Journal, which we have here since 1897. We've been here.
Wow.
There it is. First paper.
Nice. Getting a little bit of reflection from
Yeah,
the
I
overhead
don't know
there.
if
That's
that'll
better.
work. But it was 4 pages, had a lot of international news. Very different approach to what community weekly newspapers used to be.
This was the world. This covered everything, didn't it?
It did. It's so interesting to see what was important because it was the only way that people had of finding out about the news. Was through newspapers at that time, and they had wire services that gave them information they put into a little weekly newspaper. Now it's all local, and we're happy to have it that way. And love covering the towns we cover.
What is your circulation, paid subscriptions?
It varies according to the season, but for our press run for the Lakeville Journal, it's $4,800 a week, and for the Millerton News, it's $1,900 to $2,000 a week. And for our special sections, and when Compass is a separate tabloid, they also get a separate distribution. So we print about 10 to 11,000 of those each time we publish those. So like Health and Wellness that we did last week,
Yes.
that gets a wider distribution. It goes in our papers, but also our drivers drop it at high traffic areas throughout the tri-state area.
Yeah.
And Tri-Corner Real Estate also gets dropped off to New York City, high-end lobbies in New York City. And you'd be surprised how many of those get picked up. But there you go, Tri-Corner Real Estate. That comes out every month.
That's beautiful. What else can you tell me?
Well, it's a challenge being a local media outlet because, we are part of our local economy, and depending on how it goes, we adjust. So we were at the location in Lakeville since 1982 and sold that building to Salisbury Bank last year and moved here in October to Falls Village. We're very happy to be in Falls Village. It's been a very welcoming town. We have covered Falls Village for decades and decades, and though it's called the Lakeville Journal, we see ourselves as a regional paper. We are, and we cover all our towns, with the same sort of focus and diligence. We certainly try to do that.
Once the pages have been checked and rechecked, Cynthia tapes them to the wall where reporters and staff can inspect them once more. This week's issue contains 69 stories, 39 photographs, and 75 display ads.
So I'm missing one of the sports pages? Am I missing a sports page? No.
It's too bad there's no way you could spell "duh" for that, because that would be the best caption for that. Owner, this is a great parenting news. Someone else was reading it. Sanitized version.
What are you checking for, James?
I am looking to make sure that our style is carried forward through all the pages. Looking for other small design things that will tie the page together and make the pages look a little more clean.
Yeah.
It's so convenient that I've actually
Jan, did you want a border on Jim Wexler's cartoon?
Now that all the stories have been updated with last-minute corrections, the paper is ready to ship electronically to the Trumbull Printing Company in Trumbull, Connecticut.
And pitching for the Pirates this afternoon, number 28, Steve Blass. warming up in the bullpen.
And on the mound, Steve Blass. And in Game 3 in Pittsburgh, he twirled a 3-hitter against the Orioles. Frank Robinson had 2 hits in 4 trips. And one of those was a home run, and that was the only run that Blass allowed the Orioles that day. And I guess when people think back over this 1971 World Series, I think a lot of people will say that Blass, perhaps more than anyone else, turned the series around. With Buford at first base and none out in the first inning, he attempted to bunt and popped out to the pitcher, Blass. There goes Buford. They've got him hung up. And he is out at second base. He broke too soon, and the alert Blass just cut him down. But no one expected the Pirate pitching to be what it has been in this series. Magnificent.
Keep your eyes on him. He pitched a 3-hitter at Pittsburgh to beat the Orioles. He's pitched a 4-hitter so far today, and he's leading 2-1. There's a drive up the middle. Hernandez in back of the bag. He's got him. Jackie Hernandez. Look at Blass. Blass has pitched the Pirates to the World Championship. The Pirates, 2 games down, have come back.
Steve Blass, who pitched such a great game, Steve. I know you just can't express yourself emotion-wise. You're all wrung out.
I don't know what to say. This is the biggest thrill that could ever happen. I don't believe it. From a skinny kid from Falls Village, Connecticut.
Yeah, well, not so skinny out there. You showed them all there was to show them, Steve.
Are we on now?
We are on.
We are on.
We've been on.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. I just have such wonderful memories of Falls Village and growing up here. And they say you can't come back home. That's wrong. You can come back home time after time after time. And I had I would say, an idyllic childhood here. I felt like I was Tom Sawyer. I didn't paint white fences, but I mowed every lawn in Falls Village with my hand mower, my reel mower, for a buck each. I fed the mink over at Arvidsson's Mink Ranch so we could ride the horses that we didn't know were being killed for the mink food. But if we watered and fed the mink, they would let us ride the horses that are being bought in. And so I just wandered all around the streets of Falls Village, and it was wonderful. It was a different time, of course. It was back in the late 40s, early 50s, where Mom would say, all right, in the summertime, I'll see you at dinner. And you just wandered all over the place. Jakob's garage, when we used to have the big snowstorms, I remember going up there and asking Les Jacobs, can I clean off the cars because of the snow, because they had to show the cars. I worked the hardest 8 hours I ever worked in my life, brushing off those cars for 8 hours, and I think I got $4. But hey, $4. That wasn't a bad thing. I've never worked so hard in my life. But down from us, between us and town, Betty Mansfield had a little produce stand right on Route 7, so it got a lot of traffic. And I asked her if I could sell for her. She needed somebody to just go out and sit in the stands and sell the apples. And she had the various types of apples, and I couldn't remember the various types. And every darn one of them that I saw was a Macintosh. there might have been everything else. And I was an entrepreneur. I was a Tom Sawyer. I out the back of comic books, I would send away for these seeds, the flower seeds and the vegetable seeds, and I would sell them to get my first BB gun, a Red Ryder BB gun. And I would go door to door, and that's what I did. I was a little businessman. I would mow lawns. I would sell seeds, flowers and vegetable seeds. Sold apples for Betty. And I was always busy. As long as I had my bicycle, I could make it work. I could make it work. Oh, I also, we had, up on the Battle Hill, we had red raspberries that grew. And I would go down to the community service and buy the little wooden baskets, and I would pick those berries and sell them for $1. So that was another job I had.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I found things to do. And I had something else on my mind, but I didn't want to forget about the berries either, because we sold those. And that was it. I was just all around town looking for things to do, and did some babysitting. Yeah, I was a busy boy. I always wanted to be busy. What's next? Lived a life of anticipation. What's the next adventure? What's the next thing to do?
Good for you.
Yeah. I also worked summers. I had a summer job with the Howe farm. Mrs. Howe, who used to read to us here in the library, was married to Frank Howe, who had a big, up on BB Hill, if you kept going up. I worked for him in summers pitching hay, and I still believe that throwing those hay bales up on the wagon never hurt me in terms of upper body strength. Vivid memory, wonderful memories of a childhood in a small town that had big dreams.
Did you always dream of becoming a baseball?
Absolutely. It's all I ever wanted to do is play ball. We lived up on Route 7, and there was a little kind of an out barn in back of us, and I would, every day in the summer, I'd fabricate these major league games, just throwing a ball against that barn, and where the different bounces would go, with different scoring rules, and just obsessed with sports in general and baseball in particular. And then, of course, playing ball up at Lee Kellogg School, in grammar school, we had a very unique field in that it was not level. It was angled up like this, so it was hard to get from home plate to first base. We threw a lot of guys out at first base. But once you got to first, it was straight across to second. And once you got there, you were running downhill to third, so everybody was able to steal third base if they were good enough to get to second. So it was a very unique baseball field. But that's how I got kind of started and played at Lee Kellogg, and then played in the Babe Ruth League up in Canaan, and then into high school at Housatonic.
You got signed in 1964?
I got signed out of high school in 1960.
Right out of high school?
Right out of high school. Went to the minor leagues. Made my way all through the minor leagues, and then came to the Pirates in the major leagues in 1964. That was my rookie year in the big leagues. And wound up spending 10 years in the big leagues, and pitching on a team that had enough talent to have us win this World Series ring in 1971, which is what you dream about. It's the greatest thing that can happen, is to be on a team that's good enough to be in the World Series. So coming from Falls Village to pitching in the World Series, quite a journey, quite a journey.
Let's go back to your childhood in Falls Village. What are some of the stories that you remember? Like, did you ever do anything outrageous on Halloween?
Oh, goodness. Halloween was one of the greatest, because we would dress up, of course, and we'd go out and make the rounds of all the houses. We knew that there were good houses. And then we'd come back and change costumes and do it again. So we doubled down all the time. We lived up on Battle Hill. We're up on Route 7. Right on Route 7, the top of the hill.
Yeah.
We rented a place from Lloyd Brinton. And then we moved down over across the tracks when you go through the underpass going toward the high school, that first house on the right.
First house on the right.
Yeah. But a story about the house we rented on Battle Hill, because the baseball, semi-attached out and back to the house was an artist studio, of which one whole side of the thing was glass. And my buddy and I, knocked out every pane of glass, and my dad had to replace the cost of that. And I will always remember being about, I don't know, 12 years old, and he came home from work and found out, and he said, "You go out and cut me a switch," and he beat my ass. I didn't break any more windows after that. I also dated every girl in Falls Village, and that's my religious time of my life, because whichever church that particular girl belonged to, I would join. So Sally Jensen might have belonged to one of the churches, Nancy Piscini and Patty Fraley, and so that was probably the most religious time of my life, chasing after those girls and going to whatever church socials they might have had. And we had square dances up at Lee H. Kellogg School, and it was a great time.
Did you meet your wife here?
I met my wife at the high school.
The high school.
But I also had a background because we used to have Grange, and we all belonged to the Grange. And you had the various things, your gatekeeper or this position, and I became the master. And Karen was the master over Sharon. And through a brochure that I saw that listed the pictures of the different masters around the 6 area towns, I remember seeing her picture in that brochure, and that's how I knew who she was. And when we got to high school, after I had met and been rejected by several girls, I met Karen, and the rest is history. We've been married 54 years plus 4 years of bad behavior in high school. So I met her that way. But that was the gathering place up above Hamsey's store. That was kind of where we had that's where we had Grange, and we would have the Christmas parties or the Valentine's Day parties. And my mother made me sing up there one time, my first performing gig. I sang, "All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth." And I got up in front of people, I don't know how the hell I did it, but I got up and sang that song in front of those people at a Christmas party. But a lot of the parties and social events were held up in that room above the it was a combination plumbing shop, Hamsey store, and the post office. That was the strip right there. Right. And above that was the big party room.
Today that's the senior center.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But baseball was the obsession.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's great.
Wanted to do that. And I don't know if I could have ever done anything else, because I can't change a light bulb. My dad was a very talented plumber. My Uncle Bill could build anything, was an artist. They skipped a generation, so I can tell you all about throwing curveballs, but they can tell you all about building things and using their hands and all that.
Bill Blass is your uncle?
Yep, Uncle Bill.
Yeah, his artwork is all over town.
Yep, yeah, and I have some of it in my home.
Good.
Yeah, and he was my hero because he was just 3 or 4 years older than I am, my Uncle Bill. And he was my hero growing up. He'd take me fishing, and he didn't have much to do with baseball, and I didn't know much about fishing. Quick story,
sure.
Down by the powerhouse on the river, he took me for a fishing lesson, and we borrowed a pole from me. He had his own, he's a tremendous fisherman. He was going to teach me how to fish, so we're down by the powerhouse, and he was giving me the casting lessons. And he said, "You just got to be flexible with your wrist and just kind of throw it out there." And my first throw took the pole right out with it into the river, and we went home. And he tried once again to take me down to South Canaan to fish in one of the brooks there. And we left on our bicycles at 8 o'clock in the morning with our lunch under our arms on the bicycles. And we left at 8 and sat down and started fishing at 9 o'clock. Bill looked around and I had already ate both lunches. So I wasn't the greatest fishing companion in the world. But he was everything to me, and Uncle Bill's still my hero. And he took time with me and helped me kind of grow up, yeah. And also helped me never to take up smoking, because on one of our fishing trips he gave me a cigarette, I took a couple puffs, I threw up, and I never smoked.
Good for you.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
But he was the man for me. He was the man. Yeah. So Falls Village is great. My Uncle Bill and I, during the summer, we knew all the people that had the gardens. And his sister, Skip, who lived right next to the firehouse, on occasion, we would go around to a garden late at night, pick some corn, we'd take it back, and Skip would cook it for us. We thought that was great. It was like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. So we had the run of the town. We had our first TV experience because there weren't too many TVs, but we used to go down to where Skip lived, right next to the firehouse. There was apartments there, and we would go up. Miles Blodgett had one of the first TV sets, and we would watch Howdy Doody and Eddie Fisher, Coke Time, and we watched boxing and wrestling. Wrestling came on a Saturday afternoon, wrestling from Marigold Gardens in Chicago, professional wrestling, and Canadian football. Some of my first memories of TV, and that was a big deal to go up there and get a chance to watch some television. I got my first fight. I don't think I've ever been in another real fight. Steve Schneider, my catcher, he was one of the toughest kids and thing. And I remember he punched me in the stomach. I did something to him. And I said, well, I don't want any more of that. And I remember he got me good. I said, I don't think I want to get in any more fight. I was a smart ass. I made some smart ass remark to him, and he let me have it. And that was the end of that. I started showing him a lot more respect.
Passenger trains.
Oh, that's another story. I used to take the train from Falls Village to Canaan to get my hair cut. And you could go. I catch the train on Saturday mornings for a quarter. You could go up to Canaan, and Mario 7 had the barber shop up until he had it forever and ever and ever. Yeah. And that was a big deal for me going up to Canaan, because I could go up there and get my hair cut and come back on the train. And there was a couple of times Uncle Bill and I would just walk up the tracks to Canaan. And I used to hitchhike, when you could hitchhike to be a bat boy for the town team from Falls Village. I'd go up, and I would be their bat boy, and some of the games they would be in Canaan, and some of them they'd go to Lakeville or Sharon or Millerton, and they would take me along, and after the games they'd all stop at some beer house and go in and start drinking beer. I couldn't go in because I was 10 or 11 years old. But they would bring me Coca-Colas. I drank more Coca-Cola as a kid than anybody in this whole area, because especially after they won an away game, they would celebrate even a little bit more. But these guys would play Sundays, and Bob Harris was a guy from Canada. He passed the hat along the way, and I was just delighted to be their bat boy. That was a big deal for me to come up and be the bat boy for the Canaan town team.
How old were you?
10, 11, 12. I'd hitchhike up to Canaan from Fallsville. And everybody knew you, and you could hitchhike. It was safe. We all hitchhiked around. And be the bat boy, and then somebody dropped me off back home. And I just love coming home, because we've gone through all these stories. It was a wonderful childhood. Mom was supportive, Dad was supportive. My grandpa was the model for the doughboy in Canaan. The statue of the World War I soldier up there right across from Collins Diner. He put on his old World War I uniform and modeled for that doughboy statue. So there's a heritage here. It's a good place to be from, and I just love coming home.
Has it changed?
No, Falls Village has not changed a lot. I loved reading. Maybe Mrs. Howell helped with that. read and read and read, and I still maintain by reading. When I talk to kids now, I said, talk to trying to stay in school and all those things. I said, read, because you learn so much from reading. And it helped me with my vocabulary. And what I do now as a baseball analyst, there's a guy doing play-by-play, and you want to get in quickly to make your point and get out because the game's going on. A strong vocabulary is important because you can use words efficiently. And so I still believe that by doing a lot of reading and learning words, get in, make your point, and get out, because you can't intrude on the big game. That's the one lesson I learned from a guy that helped me. He said, don't get in the way of the game. So by having a good vocabulary, you can get in, make your quick point, and get out so the game can continue and not be intruded upon. When I talk to kids, I try to emphasize that. Racking my brains to think of more, and I'll be driving back to Pittsburgh and think of more stories, but we've covered a good bit of ground. Good.
So this is a 1908 Palmer rack and cloth press from Cub Scout, Connecticut, and it's been through a lot in the last 40-some years I've had it. It's been out to Santa Fe, it's lived in Oxford, it's been all over the place, but it's now on its third electric motor. When I got it, it had a porcelain General Electric motor on it, all porcelain fittings, and it now has a pretty modern, nearly waterproof Dayton motor, and it's the same type of press that has been used commercially for 100 years, except it's a mini, it's very small. It's basically a social affair. If you work your tail off all day long, you can make about 35 gallons. A commercial press makes that in about 20 minutes. And anyway, it's our family heirloom, and it's oak and steel, and it's a fun little thing, especially for kids to get together with.
Okay, let's go take a look at it.
So these oak press boards, these days it would be plastic, of course. The correct food handling equipment is all plastic now, but this is the original stuff from 1908, and we have new press cloths. The old burlap ones, they look like hand-loomed burlap, long ago fell apart, and so we've replaced them with just cotton sheet material. And the fruit goes into the scratter. The knives on that thing make it into pumice, and we have, some of this is falling apart here and needs to be replaced, but anyway, this thing goes at great speed and shreds the apples, and they fall out this chute into the cloths, and we fold up the cloths, put a new press board on top of that one, and the frame is up one, and we keep on going until we have a full stack, which is called a cheese. and we slide the cheese down under the press frame here and wind down the press board, and out the hole goes the cider, and we use the bucket to fill the jugs. So that's pretty much the anatomy of the press. It's been through a lot, so the critical pieces have been replaced, like the motor, and it runs like a top. It's perfectly efficient, it's just slow. And we'll press some. How early is it? Should I just go ahead and make some?
If you like.
Okay. Well, here we go. So we're mixing apples and pears and quinces. Jacket cider.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well.
How are you?
Good. I just finished all the food.
All the food?
So,
Oh, great. Yeah.
line the press board down on top of the cheese, it's called, the stack of filled cloths. And you can see that the bucket's half full of free run before we even started squeezing. The apples are very juicy.
Thank you.
Was it in over 24 hours?
Salute.
Salute.
Obviously, I shower every night. Yeah, I would have.
Oh, delicious.
Yes, excellent.
Isn't that good?
Yes.
So we have to watch the bucket because it can overflow. No.
Hey, how are you? Oh, thanks for coming. Hey, how are you? Oh, good. I hope you're going to eat food and drink cider. We can put up. Yeah. How are you? Yay! Yay! Just the beginning. Yes.
I don't miss that. I gotta
You
say.
probably know Mike Carnivals.
Oh, hi.
That's really good. John
That is like the best cider I've ever tasted. Thank you.
John is right there.
Oh.
This is Cece, his wife.
It's been a while.
And these are beautiful daughters.
Thank you.
Rebecca loves to ride, so she's
How you doing? Good.
so much getting there.
Thank you.
Here's Leon making cider.
There's our oldest Rebecca and our youngest Celeste.
Is it good?
No one's
Thank you, Leon.
Take some cider hopes to help her cure.
Oh, it's good.
And we're both supposed to keep the horse straight and calm. So, I'm trying to say to the other person, you're pulling too much, or whatever.
This is mild, it's windy up
I'm going to make a few remarks myself before we start with our guests. I've known Pat for, I guess, 30 years, and we've gone through a lot of trials and tribulations in town and issues, and sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't agree. And when we don't agree, sometimes it's very sharply, and sometimes when we don't agree, sparks fly. And yet, over all these years, we've become loyal friends. And that is a characteristic of Pat, that she doesn't hold grudges. And in fact, she's willing to bend over backwards to move forward with what she believes is in the public interest. Other parts of Pat, beyond her fierceness in pursuing what she believes is right, you may not be as familiar with as I am. She is a kind and warm-hearted person. The most noble commendation you can make about a person, in my world, is to say they are trustworthy. And that says more about their character in that one word, trustworthiness, than anything else you need to know. And Pat is one of the most trustworthy persons I've ever known. Pat's interest in education is not only her professional career, but her love of seeing our children educated. And so we're going to have a performance by Mr. Martinez's troupe of performers, and I'm turning this area over to him.
Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. Lost village, where the train falls, take me home, country
Soon after retiring, Pat invited us to her home. Good. Believe it or not, I think we're finally ready.
That's okay. However long it takes, it takes.
Yeah. I want to say a couple words before we start your story.
Okay.
From the time you were a child, because I want people to know who you are. You've lived in Falls Village about 46 years, from what I understand.
That's right.
And 40 years of those you have been in public life.
43, actually.
43, doing public service.
That's right.
Most recently, 12 years as first selectman.
That's correct.
And for people who don't know what a first selectman is, it's like a mayor. It's like the head of the government in the town.
Right.
And before those 12 years, you were on the Board of Selectmen for 10 years, I understand.
That's right.
So, when you were running for the Board of Selectmen in 1995, I saw where you had pledged to look into procuring grants for Falls Village, which you did amazingly well once you got elected. The figure is $2 million in grants from the state.
Actually, it's a little bit over that.
A little bit over that.
If you count everything, it's about 2.3 million, actually.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
For a little town, that's a lot of money.
It is.
A lot of KO, as they say. And that started with the daycare center?
That was when we got our first, it was a small town economic program grant, and we became aware of it. Louis was first selectman at the time, and we actually submitted 2 grants. One for the daycare center, to renovate the daycare center. The other one to do a pool, because our pool on Page Road, which was, used to be just a spring-fed swimming hole. And over the years they had put fiberglass on the bottom of it, but because it was natural water, we still had to chlorinate it, and it became harder and harder to chlorinate it and make it meet the state standards for water safety. We moved the recreation area from 35 Page Road, where it had been for years and years and years, and in 2008 or 2009, when we completed the pool with the help of a grant, that became our recreation area. And then we came next with the steep grants for the daycare center on 35 Page Road. And then that was a addition. We added 2 sections to the middle of the building. One for a before and after school program, and the other one a room for the infant toddlers. But then we got very fortunate. Nothing is done in a vacuum in a small town, as you probably realize. It's a lot of collaboration and cooperation. So the next number of grants that we got, groups of people got together and wrote the grants.
Like for the senior center?
Well, that one...
came later?
The senior center one came earlier. The senior center one was a different kind of grant. It wasn't a steep grant, but it was a grant from the state of Connecticut. And Pete Lawson wrote the grant for that. And there was a committee put together that oversaw that grant and renovated the second floor, which is where the senior center had always been. But we renovated that second floor, so that was another type of grant that we got from the state. And I didn't even count that grant in the 2.3 million or so that we got. But that was one of the very first grants that we got. Pete got that. Interestingly enough, over the years, the steep grants became much more complicated. Before, it was just a brief narrative. You sent in your brief narrative about what you wanted to do, how much you thought it was going to cost, and that was the sum total of the application. But after 2005, the grants became much more complicated to do. They wanted lots and lots and lots of information. But since we had been successful with those first two grants, then we pursued others.
Like for the library?
I believe the library was the next grant we got. That was a $200,000 grant to do renovations at the library. And the library board of directors and I worked together on that grant. Then I believe the next two grants, the next one was 107 Main Street. Now that's where the senior center is. But this was actually for the exterior of the building. Replacement of the roof, all new windows, and we used a specialist in historical windows to redo the windows. Of course, the elevator, and there was a small addition to the back that housed an entryway and an elevator to go up to the second floor, and complete redo of the painting outside. And if you look at 107, above the doorways in the front, there is a shingled area. So that area was completely redone. And we got a $275,000 grant for that. Louis and I worked on that one together. And then we applied for 103 Main Street, which was a $200,000 grant, and that's the Children's Theater. And they've renamed the building the Center on Main. And somewhere during that time, we also got a $250,000 grant to do all the work for the area at 188 Route 7 South, which was clearing the land, putting the septic system in there for the Emergency Services Center, and doing all that preliminary work. That was the first grant. Then we got a second grant of $200,000 that we used to do everything that was related to the new building. We also got a grant for the renovation of the South Canaan Meeting House, where
the steeple.
Yep, the steeple was redone on that. We lifted, part of the building was lifted up to repair the sill around the bottom, and the entryway was redone to accommodate with a handicapped bathroom, and some other minor things were done as far as the $200,000 would go.
Last but not least, the village center, the sidewalks.
That was a streetscape and sidewalk project.
Yeah.
That was not a steep grant. That was from the Department of Housing. The maximum amount of money we could get for that was $500,000, and we received $450,000, which is pretty astounding when you are competing with so many other towns. Now, steep grants are meant for smaller towns, but over the years, smaller towns became towns that had larger populations, up to 30,000 people. So for us to get that grant with a 1,200 or so population was pretty amazing. I'm a big one for cooperation and collaboration, because I think you get so much more done than if you try to do things yourself. And you have to involve your stakeholders.
Why were you successful in your people in getting grants?
Because I think that we had some people that were a little bit familiar with grant writing, so we had to step up in that area. And all of us who worked on these grants were pretty pragmatic, and we understood what the state wanted in the application.
Your father was in town government up in Canaan.
North Canaan.
North Canaan.
Right.
Was that an inspiration to you to
yes,
get involved?
for sure. My father did very public things. He served on the Board of Finance for many, many years and was chairman of the Board of Finance for many years. He served as a member of the Board of Selectmen for a time. His longest service, though, was to the Board of Education in North Canaan. And he was very vested in education. My mother was a school teacher. Back in those days, though, when you got married, you didn't work anymore. So from the time that I was born until the time that I think I was a senior in high school and my brother was a sophomore or junior, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But then she went back to the teaching world.
And you followed in her footsteps.
Actually, I did more than people might realize. She was the first graduating class of Westfield State College up in Westfield, Massachusetts, to get a Bachelor of Science degree. And that is also where I went to school and got my Bachelor of Science degree in education and my Master's of Science degree in education with a concentration in special education. So yes, I followed in her footsteps, that's true.
You followed in her footsteps, and you, from what I understand, for 37 years, you taught 5th grade, English, social studies, and language arts.
I did at Kent Center School, but I also, I was one of those folks in the school that had a certification that allowed me to go almost any place in the school, anywhere but kindergarten. So I taught the majority of my time in 5th and 6th grade in the areas that you mentioned, but I also taught for 5 years in 7th and 8th grade doing language arts, reading, and math, including algebra. I did 7 years in 4th grade, and I did a couple of years doing part-time in 3rd grade, and then doing what was called the Pella program, which was Potential Extraordinary Learning Ability. And that was a program for the gifted and talented kids in our school. And I did that program for a couple of years until the Board of Education in Kent could decide whether that was a program worth keeping, and they could hire somebody full-time for that instead of me splitting my time between 5th and 6th grade and that program. So I had a very rich teaching career, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I really did. I was very involved in teaching. I love teaching. I love working with kids. I taught social studies primarily in the 5th grade, which is in the curriculum is American history, and I just loved teaching. I love teaching American history. And I was fortunate that I also taught literature and writing, because there is such a connection that can be made between literature and writing and social studies that I was able to coordinate those things with the social studies units that I taught, because there's so many nonfiction books that are historically oriented as well as historical fiction that can catch kids' attention. So in my literature classes, my kids had to read a certain number of books per quarter, and they were allowed, of course, to have some of those books be related to the social studies unit that we might have been studying at the time. In addition to my teaching duties, I did a lot of coaching at Kent Center School. I coached the girls softball team, and I coached the girls basketball team at different times, and soccer too, at different times during my time at Kent Center School. I refereed the basketball down there for them when it was time for other people to, take the coaching duties. I was the liaison between our faculty association and the Board of Education. I was, out of the 37 years that I taught at Kent Center School, over 25 of those years I was a faculty association president. And we had a really great working relationship with the Kent Board of Education. I would go to meetings and report to them often. I just had I had a wonderful career, and public service just meshed with that so well. The other thing that I did with kids is the daycare. All revolved around kids. When I was on the Board of Education, the first time on the local board, Cookie Kabarak and Lisa Harmon came to me and said, you know, you've got some rooms in the school. We have home daycares, but we think that the town should have a daycare center. What do you think about the idea of us using one of the rooms in the school to have a daycare center? I thought that was a great idea. We worked as a team with a few other people to put together a proposal for the Board of Education, and we did that in 1980. By 1982, we had one of the rooms in the school for our daycare center, and the board was intimately involved in that because it was in the school building, and that's when I got involved in the daycare in 1980. The school needed the room. Pete Lawson came to me and said, I know you guys need a place to relocate. He said, what do you think about the building at the rec center? Now that building was just a simple building. It was basically a shell, but it did have bathrooms, so it did have plumbing and a septic system. It did have a room where summer programs, arts and crafts and things like that were provided for the kids because the pool was right there at the time.
On Page Road.
On Page Road, right. And Pete had become concerned because the building was being vandalized. And I think the last straw for him was when a huge pickup truck with a plow on it in the winter went into the parking area, drove right up to the building, turned around and slammed into the side of it with a plow. And then he thought, well, that building's got to be occupied. The daycare needs a place to go. Let's see if we can work with the daycare board of directors in the town to do it. And we did it.
Somehow, in all of this, you've found time to volunteer at the church. Which church is that?
Well, when we had St. Patrick's Church here in our town,
right.
That was a mission church of St. Joseph's Church in Canaan, which of course now has been all combined with St. Mary, St. Bernard's from Sharon, and St. Joseph are all in one parish now, and they have a new name. So when my kids were younger and we were in St. Patrick's, our mission church, I taught CCD for probably 12 or 15 years every Sunday, and my kids were altar people. Kathy got the advantage of being able to serve as an altar person. When I was growing up, it was just the boys that could be the altar boys, but the church did come a bit of a way so that servers, they call them servers now, I guess, could be boys or girls. So up until the time that St. Patrick's was abandoned as a mission church and sold, I was very involved in Sunday services. Even as a kid in St. Joseph, Father Malley, who was the parish priest at the time, would choose 3 8th grade girls, and we would go in after 11 o'clock Mass, and we would count all the money from the offertory and put it all together for him. So even as a kid, I was involved in the church.
What is your earliest memory of Falls Village? You moved to Falls Village about a year after you married Kurt?
Right, 1971, we built this house, yeah.
You built this house?
Yeah. My earliest memories of Falls Village, though, go way back.
Tell me.
Because my cousins, Jean and Joy, their uncle was Edmund Dean. And Edmund Dean had the farm right there on Route 7. So we spent a lot of time, my brother and I spent a lot of time in Falls Village. We used to swim in the Hollenbeck way behind Edmund's farm. There was kind of a corner of the Hollenbeck where we would go to swim. So Falls Village has always been on my radar because my cousin's uncle lived here and we spent a lot of time with my cousins. So Falls Village and the Allen family, my maiden name Allen, go a long way back to Falls Village because my aunt's brother lived here, and we came down and played here quite a little bit. Probably my most vivid memory of Falls Village, though, is the Firemen's Carnivals. My dad was a member of the Canaan Volunteer Fire Department or Volunteer Fire Company, and we used to come down here for the carnival when the Carnivals was still a big thing. I think it was in 1956, you know, my dad bought raffle tickets, and the first prize was a color TV. And my dad put my name on one of the tickets, and I won.
They get done with school, so 26. 5, 26. 24.
It's a good place to bring up kids.
It is. And all of my kids, I think, will tell you that they had a wonderful experience growing up here.
You have 3 kids.
I have 3 kids, yeah.
Kathy, Ethan, and Jason.
That's correct. Jason is a real homebody, and he never left. Well, he was in the Navy for 3 years, but he returned here, and he works for, the only job he's ever had is for Edward R. Hamilton, and he's risen through the ranks at Edward R. Hamilton, and he lives 2 doors down from us.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Yeah. And our daughter Kathy currently lives in my mom and dad's house in North Canaan with my nephew and his fiancée. And the one that's got the traveling bug is our younger son Ethan. And he loved growing up in Falls Village, but he's much more of a city guy. He lived in New York City for a few years. Then he moved out to Los Angeles for 10 years, and about 5 or 6 years ago, he moved to London.
What's happening with that big maple tree there on Railroad Street?
That was an interesting event as well. Back in that storm, 7 or 8 years ago, that October storm, at the end of October when we had that heavy wet snow and all the leaves were still on the tree, a huge portion of that tree broke off. That tree is a silver maple, and silver maples are not structurally strong. They're quite weak, in fact, and they grow very quickly. And sometimes the canopy can't, the base cannot sustain the size of the canopy. And a couple of years ago, we thought it would be best to take that tree down, because that tree hangs over the sidewalk around the green, and it also hangs over the travel lane on Railroad Street as you turn in to Main Street. But because it was on town land, we had to go through a procedure of noticing that we were going to take it down. Some people objected to us taking it down. We had to have a hearing, and the tree official, our tree warden, had the hearing, and he decided that before we took it down, that first we would try to trim it out. So last December, we trimmed it out extensively, actually. It already had guide wires in it. Some people didn't think it had guide wires, but the guide wires had been in it for 15 years. One of the guide wires has snapped, so that was replaced, and the tree is still standing. It does not have the kind of foliage that it had previously, because so much of it was dead in the canopy. It had to be trimmed out. But we did trim it out, because that was the ruling of the tree warden based on people who came to the hearing. And only 4 or 5 people came to the hearing, but they were very much in favor of keeping that tree. Yeah. So that tree, is put together, and it's there. But the current Board of Selectmen is going to have to keep an eye on that tree, and I will be keeping an eye on that tree too, because if I'm going to be weeding and taking care of the roses, I don't want something falling on the sidewalk or on me or anyone else.
Of all your 43 years in public service in Falls Village, what are you most proud of? What are you happiest with? Can you point to any single or...
You know what? I get a little emotional about this, because public service has been my greatest gift. It really and truly has. And I don't think that if my dad had not been as involved in the community, that I would have been as involved as I have been. It has given me such joy and pleasure to do that. And aside from the fact that sometimes it's hard to get people to do this, I think that what I am most proud of is that I did a tabulation about a month ago of the number of openings that we have on town boards and commissions, and we do have a few hires that we have to have because they have to have certain qualifications. And I always knew that we had a great number of people that volunteered for our town. But somehow some folks thought that our town was a closed circle, kind of, in terms of who was making decisions for our town. And I didn't think that was true. So I sat down and I did the calculations. And what I found out was that there are 98 positions on boards and commissions and hired jobs. Of those 98 positions, 82 of them are held by different people. And I think that says an enormous amount about the volunteerism and the commitment to our town, of the people in our town. It's not always easy to get people to serve, but guess what? We are. And I'm really proud of that. So I think that that's one among many of the things that I'm proud of, is that our town is really open and open to all that would like to serve. And, you know, that gives me great satisfaction that we've been able to find people. And you know what? Almost, I can't think of one member of any board of commission off the top of my head that isn't committed to doing the work of that board or commission. We've been really lucky.
Okay,
Yeah.
Denny and Judy Jacobs.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Hi. You want to talk about the car show?
Sure.
How it began, did you get the idea, how you got the idea, and how it, a little bit of the history.
It sort of started on our 75th anniversary for Jacob's Garage, when a lot of our customers showed up to our little celebration with their cars, their special cars, you know, the classic cars and the antiques and that. And we said, gee, someday we should do a car show. So when our 80th anniversary came around, we said, let's do the car show. And from there...
Mix it up with the anniversary, and it worked out good. It just exploded from there.
Yeah.
I think the first year we ended up with maybe 50 or 60 cars.
And now you're getting...
And now we're up to 400.
400 plus. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's growing in reputation, and people love it. They love Falls Village.
It's the perfect town to do a car show. There's ways around the town. It's a fairly quiet town, and you can close the road, the main streets down for a day without anyone going crazy. So it's a good place to have it, and everyone really loves it just because the town is what it is. It's a pretty little town and kind of secluded in its own little valley.
Heads up on the top there.
just want them right over.
That's all right.
No, that's fine. But by the time I get there, they get out of the way.
From how far away do...
Oh, we got them. Some
Maine.
people come from North Carolina.
Yeah,
just for the show?
Yeah,
Wow.
people from Maine, we get a lot of New York State, a lot of Massachusetts and Connecticut.
This year we had one come from Cincinnati area, Ohio, was it, for the truck?
Oh, they came from Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Yeah,
So
for
they
the
came-
Sanford and Son truck
Yeah,
that
came all the
we
way
had
out
as a.
just for the car show and wants to come out again next year.
You had actors from Sanford and Son?
Yes, we had
did.
Howard Platt, who is a former resident of Falls Village, and he played one of the cops in the show. And he's still good friends with the Bedeaus. And they got to talking, and he says, I know where the truck is. Maybe we should come to the car show. And we said, sure. And they trailered it up, and they loved it so much, they're coming back again next year.
Yeah, they restored this truck back to having its original rust on it.
Just like in the show.
It's exactly like it was in the show. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
And what truck was it?
It was
a 1948 or 49 Ford F1 that was used.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So that was a big hit.
They arrived on a Friday night, and it was going through town all
Driving
weekend, so it was pretty neat.
Yeah, we had fun with that. And for our 85th anniversary, we decided we wanted to do something really big and get a special guest, and we got Shirley Muldowney. That was an experience of a lifetime.
That really was. She stayed with us, I think, for 3 days.
Yeah.
And
But she-
having her for 3 days was incredible.
She was the first woman to win championship in drag racing, and not only the first woman, but the first person to win 3 championships.
Yeah. She was nominated for, I think, 10 or 12 Hall of Fames. Incredible woman. Been through everything.
So she broke all sorts of barriers in the racing field, and she's been my hero for decades, ever since she came out on the racing front. Of course, we're into drag racing, so we knew all about her. And just having the word out that Shirley Muldowney was coming, that's why we had so many people that year.
There's a lot of people there.
It was just a phenomenal crowd, and everybody was lined up to come in and get her autograph and meet her, and it was
I think we ended up with about 3,000 or 4,000 people.
It was an amazing car show. Everybody welcomed her with open arms. It was a
really
great day.
famous person. She's a really nice lady to meet. Especially if you're into the racing field.
Right.
When we picked her up at the airport, one of the guys that were checking her in says, "Oh, Muldowney, that's the name of a famous race car driver. Wouldn't it be something if you were her?" She says, "Yeah, it would be." Never said any more.
You have a dragster yourself.
I do,
don't you, Danny?
yeah. We do, quarter mile racing,
And you get that going how fast?
That's a fairly slow car. It's 150 mile an hour, a quarter mile. Hers was 300 miles an hour, or better.
Yeah.
And she did 0 to 312 miles an hour in like 4 seconds or 5 seconds.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we've made Falls Village Motor City.
Yeah, we've broken the record. I think we've had the most people in Falls Village ever in one day. So I think that's pretty good.
But it's also really nice because a lot of people who used to live here come back to Falls Village to see the event and to come to the garage, and they reminisce when they come to the garage, and we set up, the displays on the garage history, and there's a lot of people, well, my father bought my first car here, and all sorts of stories that we hear.
Yeah, it's on a whole new generation now, but they've all picked it up from their parents, you know.
Yeah, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of people I haven't seen for years show up for this car show.
Oh, nice.
And it's really a fun time.
Good. You are two of my favorite people in Falls Village. You're my favorite couple.
Well,
I wonder if we could digress for just a moment, because you live together,
Yeah.
you work together, you
argue together.
We've been married 40 years, just had our 40th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yes. And
What's your
We're just
secret?
naturals.
How do you do it?
It's when you got a best friend, you got a best friend.
I love that. That's great.
And that's all it boils down to.
And we know when to, if we're getting on each other's nerves, we back away, we compromise.
Which is not very often.
We just, and he, his job's out there and booking and things like that, and I'm over here, so we have our things to do, and
yeah.
And then
Family.
when we're at home, we do separate things. We're not always.
We're pretty much always together.
We are.
We always go together wherever we go.
Yeah.
So.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Falls Village.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
nice.
I was 14 when I met him. He just turned 18.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we went together for 3 years, 4 years, something like that. Got married.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Glad to do it.
Because I know you're both very, very busy.
Yeah.
So I
Always
really
are.
appreciate this.
Well,
Great.
I'm glad he was able to
I am
take a
too.
break and come
Yeah.
out and join us.
Yeah,
Great.
that's fun to do. I look forward to even though it's a lot of work, we look forward to the car show.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, and thank you for all you do, Aaron.
Yeah,
It really does mean a
absolutely.
lot.
Yeah.
A lot for the Historical Society, too, to have all this to say.
Well, it's a lot for the town.
Pleasure.
To look back
I
at
love
this.
doing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay.
All righty.